I'm Sean Patrick with 590 KZO, and I love roller coasters. And in addition to enjoying the thrill of the ride, I also marvel at their design and construction, twisted innovation in a quest for an unworldly thrill experience. I want to learn more about these wonderful machines, and so joining me today is Ed Dangler, Director of Maintenance and New Construction at Cedar Point. He's been in the business for 33 years, so I'm asking the right guy. Mr. Dangler, thanks for your time today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
I thought maybe you guys wouldn't be so busy with the season at an end, but it seems like it's always busy there for you, huh?
It's a different busy. The summer's an exciting busy, but the winter rebuild is a very busy time for my division in maintenance and construction. We do lots of work on the rides. We do NDT, tear all the roller coaster trains down, every nut, bolt, and washer. Everything gets inspected by an outside non-destructive testing firm. We do our construction this time of year, so it's a different busy, but it's very, very busy for my division. It's kind of nice in one way because we all work the same hours and the same shifts, and in the summertime we're working, there's somebody here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in 3-shift operations. So it's just a different pace, but still very busy.
I've noticed on some of the steel coasters that in some of the earlier designs, like Gemini or Corkscrew or, for example, Magnum, you have the wheel assemblies on the trains on the inside of the rails. And some of the later designs, like Top Thrill Dragster, Millennium, Maverick, the assemblies are on the outside of the rails. Is there an advantage or disadvantage to either way?
Not from the riding experience or from general physics. The big change was based on steel usage. If the supporting square metal comes up to support the round pipe from the inside, you use less inches of it. It also makes the guide wheels on the side easier for the maintenance folks to replace and inspect, but they're not under the track. So the newer ones are a little bit easier on us and a little bit less bulky of a structure.
Is there a lifespan on those wheel assemblies? The entire assembly is cycled through every so often, and maybe like the rubber wheels are replaced or resurfaced or something?
The wheels get resurfaced. We hope they last the whole season, but a lot of times we do have wheels fail in very hot weather. The wheel assemblies don't. Most of the coasters don't have a predictable life that's set in stone. Some do. Some through computer modeling, they're good for X amount of years and things. And that's why we do the non-destructive testing in the winter. We inspect every single weld on every single roller coaster train in the park every winter, to make sure there's no indications of failures or anything of that such. But in a pure engineering term, they have infinite life.
Now, you talked about the sometimes having them on the outside is a bit easier for the technician to work on the trains. It's a pretty clear career path if you want to work on automobiles. You know, a lot of people, their dad was big into cars and they worked on them since they were little kids, but not so clear. How does one get into being a technician for a roller coaster? Is it similar to being an auto mechanic?
There are some similarities with a automotive technician and factory high-speed production equipment. We have a lot of the same equipment. Limit switches, computer-operated machinery, air cylinders. It's all very, very similar. It's just in a very unique application. So some of those industrials or automotive backgrounds are very, very good for us. If they have a good background or history or schooling, we can turn them into a roller coaster man in a year or so.
I imagine an electrical background would be helpful, too.
Especially with the complexity of the control systems. And the design in the industry and certainly the standards of Cedar Fair are very high. Whereas a lot of our multi-vehicle rides, we have 2 computers monitoring all the events, and this redundancy theory carries itself out to a lot of switches. For example, if there's one switch, its location to clear a train, or say a train's past the zone so another train can occupy it, we use at least 2 switches to identify that train. Everything's backed up and redundant, and the computer what they call the PLCs, are very, very complex, very sophisticated nowadays, and do a lot of things for us.
This sort of leads into another question I had, which is, what are some of the more common causes of ride stoppages? With all the computer software, is it oftentimes, say, a blown fuse or a switch or something of that nature?
It's interesting that you asked that question, because that's one of the biggest challenges in my ride maintenance departments in this division, is how do we keep the rides running without breakdown, but still maintain a very, very high level of safety. So typically what you see, most of our downtime, it's not the actual machine or things break, but it's the monitoring systems that make sure everything is running fine. I'll give you an example. Rarely do we have an air compressor go bad, but the pressure switches we have all over the ride to monitor air pressure to brakes, if one of those switches is not working correctly or acting right, the whole ride shuts down. There's nothing wrong with the compressor, just that switch monitoring that pressure might have had a spider web in it or got knocked or miscalculated or it's just something, maybe just wore out from time. But typically the air compressor's fine. The same with our chain and our lift monitoring devices. It's usually not the motors, not the chains, but it's those monitoring devices that go bad. And sorry to say for the roller coaster fans, that does happen, but that's our job to try to fix them quickly and keep them from happening.
You've talked a little bit about some of the maintenance going on over the winter. Are the trains run over the rails in the freezing temperatures, and how else are the rides winterized?
No, all the trains come off the track and get disassembled in shops. The certain parts get degreased, and then we start the non-destructive testing. We start taking the trains off the rides right a day or two after the park closes, believe it or not. We start right away. And then it's a very orderly, I call it organized chaos, but we know exactly what part goes to what ride, what car, what side of the car that part came off on the whole thing. It's all indexed, and we keep very, very intense records, very thorough records of all that process, all that testing. And then once the NDT, the non-destructive testing, is done, then we start assembling. And we have a couple shops that we use during the internally in Cedar Point during the winter, and that's where all the work is. And it's a lot of work, and it's very, very exact work, so you have a very highly trained ride mechanic staff that does all this assembly.
It sounds very intricate, and a question I have is, does the computer keep track of exactly which seats are in use each ride? You know, for example, when a seat is not in use on Millennium Force, they'll put the lot bar closed all the way. Is the computer recording the number of passengers on each and every single train, maybe weighing the train? How much data is taken about each individual train that's launched?
Not much individual data. We do keep track of hours of use, you know, how much time is on one train. Most rides, the trains all run about the same amount of hours. I mean, it's within a few percent at the end of the year. We close the lap bar for clearly operational issues so that it doesn't move around and scare people, it doesn't bang, so it's all the way down and locked, even when the seat is empty. But we don't actually monitor how many trips every train takes, but we do monitor hours.
Let's talk about the fun part. Let's talk about the launch. You're all strapped in. You're getting ready to go up that first hill or what have you. There's a few different launch systems in use there. A lot of the traditional coasters, of course, will use a chain lift to get you up that first hill. Millennium, I believe, has a cable lift because a chain would have been too heavy at that length. And then you have magnetic propulsions like, say, Wicked Twister or Maverick. What are the advantages and disadvantages? And do you see a trend towards maybe eventually someday all coasters being chainless, being magnetically propelled?
I don't know if we'll ever see that. The linear induction motors, the electromagnetic repelling systems or repulsion systems, get very efficient at steep inclines. So the power consumption to get that train up a steep, long hill is very high compared to a conventional lift chain arrangement. The cable system on the Millennium Force allows us to go up a very high, very steep lift at a very fast pace. I mean, it's a very quick lift. Where the chain would be, the motor size would have to be very, very big, and the chain would be huge to transfer that kind of power. The advantage of the linear induction motor electromagnetic systems are there is no chain to wear out. There is no grease. There's no noise. It's our Maverick is an up incline lift with linear induction motors on it, and it's just silent. It's just a swoosh, and the train goes up. It's almost like magic, and so that's one of the advantages. You don't have to replace the chain every so many years. You don't have the grease or the mess, all that stuff in it, and it's quiet.
Let's talk about the negative G sensation or the air time of a ride. Magnum, for example, has this terrific series of air hills, and a lot of times that first drop down the hill is where you sort of feel like you're free falling. Is that basically the magic ingredient in these rides, is trying to produce that moment, that adrenaline, instinctive reflex of, oh my gosh, I'm falling, but to do it in a safe manner?
You know, that there's a lot of the design process that deals exactly with those sensations the rider feels once the ride's designed and built. And we want to give that uplifting feeling or that weightless feeling But sometimes you think you're weightless when you're not. We do monitor our coasters with accelerometers every year to see what changes there are. Typically, in a steel roller coaster, every 3 years, it's rarely ever changing a steel track. It's always the same. But on the wooden ones, we monitor those forces at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year, and we compare them, see if anything's different. But the designers of them calculate all those forces and plan on it. We don't want a ride that tries to throw you out of your seat very hard, but gently lift you up and give you that sensation. So, right, Earth keeps us attached to Earth by one gravitational force, and sometimes when you go from one gravitational force to maybe half a G or a fourth of a G or so, you get a weightless feeling. There are rides like our Blue Streak that you actually go to zero weightless, and the one hill on the Millennium Force.
Now, of course, the reason that we can have that nice, safe, fun-filled zero-G experience is because we have a nice, safe restraint system holding us in our seat. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the different types of restraint systems and how they've sort of evolved from like a simple lap bar like you would have in, say, for example, Wildcat, to the more modern lap restraints like on Millennium or Top Thrill Dragster. And then there are also some rides which have an over-the-shoulder system like Maverick and Mantis. What determines mostly what sort of system is going to be used? Is there a desire to keep the restraints to a minimum as much as possible to accentuate that thrill aspect?
We like in the design phase, we like to keep the appearance or the feeling of the lap bar or the restraining device minimal, but we want it to be very, very, very safe, very hold you in. We do them with thinner stuff, but stronger. Some of what leads us to design a certain, where the manufacturer designs certain lap bar systems today, is the ASTM standards. There's an ASTM standard 2291 that says if your ride is this fast and has this many G-forces, or you go upside down, or etc., then you must have this type of lap bar system. So we do comply with all the ASTM standards on that. We do test them on different people to see if you can get out. Some rides, because they go upside down, we want them escape-proof. I mean, you can't get out if you tried. But there is a minimal feeling that we want to give. Like you mentioned the Maverick, which is an excellent system. Not only is it an excellent system, but it's monitored. If a bar is not locked or not down far enough and locked, actually it monitors that locked with two different devices, you can't launch. It's a very, very complex system, but very good. So we've tried different things and worked with the ASTM and the ride manufacturer engineer design these so that they're not going to release anybody from the seat, obviously, but we also want them to be comfortable and minimal.
One example that comes to mind for me of the difference that a restraint system can make is with Top Thrill Dragster and another coaster which I have not had an opportunity to check out yet, but I imagine you're familiar with Kang Dakar over in another park, which is, it's basically a copy of Top Thrill Dragster, just slightly taller and faster, so they can say. But what I've read from people who've ridden both rides is Top Thrill has only a lap bar restraint, so your upper body has some freedom to it, whereas Kang Dakar has an over-the-shoulder restraint, which sort of tucks you in, makes you maybe feel more secure. But a lot of people seem to feel that the Top Thrill experience is better, primarily because of the restraint system.
And the Top Thrill is a very safe system, and there is also a seat belt that's used in there. Then it's a secondary, redundant device to help to keep folks in. And the design is such that you can't come out of that. We push it down, and by its design, it's also restrictive for very large people. We do have an issue where guests try to ride certain rides like the Top Thrill Dragster, and they're just too big. We can't allow that bar to be up beyond a certain point, because then you start to get out of the fully safe envelope, and that just can't happen. We do disappoint some of our larger guests with that, but it's the design that the manufacturer and the authorities approve that those designs, and that's just what it is. We can't have small people on certain rides because the lap bar can't hold them in well, and it's the same with the very large people. But the Top Thrill Dragster is a good balance of real openness at 120 miles an hour. I mean, you're really out in the air. There's nothing really over your shoulders, but you're tucked in pretty good.
What's the ballpark lifespan on a new ride, and does it vary among like roller coasters versus other types of rides? And is there a minimum number of years once you've unveiled a project that you're really committed to that project, and then after that you have the flexibility to decide if you're ready to retire that one?
Well, from an engineering standpoint, they're engineered for indefinite life, for infinity. On wooden roller coasters, the saying in our industry is once you build a wooden roller coaster, you never stop building it. And the wooden roller coaster is different because they swell with moist air or rain and shrink in hot, dry weather. So we're constantly working and adjusting those. But the steel rides do not have a life limit. They're, as long as they're maintained well, which they are in the Cedar Fair parks. We see no reason why we can't run them for a long, long time. There are parts to certain roller coasters that manufacturers have specifications that after so many years you change these particular pieces out, and certainly we comply with that. And that's a lot of our winter program is going and replacing parts that did get to an age where the manufacturer thinks it's best to change them. The ride structure itself, they're real robust. They don't seem to have a particular life.
Would the park consider building a new wooden coaster?
I think everything is open for Cedar Point and Cedar Fair. I don't think in the near future we would. We have the classic blue streak and the big fast mean streak, and they seem to fit well in here. The Gemini and the Mine Train are kind of a hybrid. They're a wooden structure with steel track. So we have plenty of wood right now. I can't see that in our very near future, but I wouldn't rule it out in a few years after that.
Well, let's talk about the new ride coming up for next season is Windseeker. It's sort of a traditional swing ride times 1,000. When you're designing one of these rides, how do they go about figuring out what the ride is going to feel like when it's done? I mean, you look at the video for Windseeker, it's tough to imagine how that's going to feel spinning around that high in the air.
Well, they know that it's when you're spinning, you'll be traveling in a certain diameter, a certain circle, in that radius, and they can calculate at that speed what the forces are. It's the velocity squared divided by the radius, a very basic formula, and the engineers plan all that. They know exactly what the G-forces is. Because the seat is, and it's a swing ride, you're going to swing out. The forces are just going to push you into your seat the whole time. And it'll be about 3/4 of a G at the most, or to a half a G around that range, constantly pushing you in your seat. The one thing I think that's going to be real special, and I can't wait for you to see it, Sean, is the location of the ride. Not only is it 300 feet tall and you're swinging in the air 30-some miles an hour, it's right on the beach on the shore of Lake Erie. It's just a sight like nobody else could possibly offer up at Cedar Point. And you're right on the edge of the beach. Some of the ride is actually into the beach. The foundation is being poured into the beach. And you're on the edge of Lake Erie. And a lot of us are now discussing whether we could see Canada from the top of that or not. So that's going to be kind of exciting in the spring when we all first get to ride it.
That's one of my favorite touches, actually, about Wicked Twister, is when you're at the top of one of those helixes, you get a brief flash glimpse over a majestic Lake Erie there, and it's right alongside, I think, where Windseeker is going to be.
It is. It's right on that side of the beach. It's a beautiful sight, and it's certainly the nicest beach on Lake Erie, no doubt. I think it's going to be an exciting ride. What
are some of the challenges being presented in the construction for Windseeker?
Well, the challenges, in particular for Cedar Point, is the winter. I mean, it's windy on the shores of Lake Erie, so when you're working with high structures and cranes, there's weather conditions that keep you from using the cranes because of the winds and things. So that's, I mean, but we're used to it. We do what we know what we need to do. Also, is the water table, because we are technically an island out in the lake. There's a water table issue, so the water is only about 6.5, 7 feet. So we have to plan on, when needed, dewatering a site and keeping it dewatered during the pouring of concrete and et cetera and stuff. And it's a challenge that this park faces that most don't. But the folks here are well versed at it. They've been through it for 141 years. So I think that's our big challenge right there. But it seems like just business as normal for this park.
Ed, do you get to test, and by that I mean ride the coasters whenever you feel a, quote, inspection is needed?
I do, and I'd probably be the worst riding partner for anybody on the ride because I don't scream. Sometimes I take notes or I look around casually. I've rode enough rides over the years that it's work for me more than anything. So I take a little bit different approach. I watch how people ride and what's happening to them, and I listen for noises. And certain our mechanics do that every morning. They ride and look for things, and our operation department rides and does inspections, and I go out and ride them too.
Let's talk a little bit about how a new ride comes to fruition. We've been talking about what's Windseeker. What is the process for adding a ride? Is there like a sort of a sole person, a head honcho there who has veto power over any particular ride choice, or is there more of like a board and a consensus on deciding what, when, and how we're going to add a new ride?
Well, Cedar Fair has arrangement is they have an executive planning board, and it's a committee type of corporate executives, and usually it starts from a business need that we need to rejuvenate this park. We need to offer our guests something new and exciting, something big, or we just added a big coaster. Maybe we'll just do some changes on some maybe a smaller ride or a new kiddie land or something. And that's where it starts. It's from the top level of Cedar Fair itself, and then they pass it off to the planning and design folks and give them some very basic, very wide open criteria, that this is the age group we're looking for, or this is the thrill we're looking for, or this is the area we're looking for, whatever. They start with that. And then planning design's head is Rob Decker, who is a very, very talented architect and designer. Jess has a great flavor for picking the right rides, putting them in the right place, designing the rides surrounding so it fits in the park. It still gives you that nostalgia feel that Cedar Point likes, and the thrills that our guests come to expect of us. So once it's in Rob's hands, then it gets down to the manufacturers and stuff, and he heads that up for the whole company. And I must say he does an excellent job. I can prove that just by come to Cedar Point and look at this collection of roller coasters and rides we have. It's like nothing I've ever seen in my 33 years.
So how much of the designing then is actually done in-house, and how much of the design is done by an outside party, or do they do most of the construction and the design is done in-house?
Well, for the ride itself, the ride manufacturer is responsible for the design. Part of the park's responsibility, my responsibility, is to oversee that design. We're always looking for compliant. A lot of rides come from Europe, as you know, Sean. So we're looking for compliance to American or North American engineering and building code standards. So we oversee it at that point, but we don't actually design the rides. We make sure the methodology they're using is correct. There are some rides like the Windseeker. We hire a German company called TUV, and there are overseers in Europe. They do material testing. They review all the design, all the calculations for us, from the foundation right up through the welds and the bolted connections on the ride. So there are eyes over in Europe all the time for us. And then we get to review the drawings here and the design of the ride area, how it's placed, the amenities that come along with it, fencing, lighting, colors. That's all done by the planning design folks. Basically, they just hand my division a package and said, okay, go buy it and build it, and then we're on our way.
So the point at which your folks' proposal, or what you're looking for, goes towards a third party, is it still at that point sort of a broad, wide open, this is the space we have, this is the budget we're looking at, this is the type of ride, and various companies will submit, well, we would suggest, this type of roller coaster, or we would suggest, this other type of a ride. I mean, how specific is it at the point where you're looking for bids? And are you looking for bids, or do you go to a specific company and say, we want, this company to build this?
On some rides, it is a bid. Most of the time, it's the Rob Decker has to weed through and cull through the capabilities and what the manufacturer has to offer in his catalog or what he can dream up. And that's the uniqueness of Cedar Point. There's so many first of rides here. Like the Magnum was the first 200-foot tall roller coaster. The Millennium Force, the first 300-foot tall roller coaster. Top 3 Thrill Dragster, the first 120-mile-an-hour roller coaster, and the first 400-foot plus roller coaster. So for rides like that, that's the first of, you really pick out a company by its capabilities, not from a catalog. And some companies have looked at some of our ideas that came from Mr. Dick Kinsel and through Robin over the years, and don't want to build something that's 300 or 400 feet tall. And other companies are feel very capable and are willing to do it, and so that's who we settle on. And it's been very successful.
As you've mentioned, Cedar Point has been home to several record-holding coasters. Is that mentioned in those board discussions? I mean, there's got to be a certain amount of pride of saying we're gonna do something, and we're once again going to be the tallest and fastest at it. Yeah,
and certainly before my tenure up here, my time. But yes, there's been times when the president, CEO, chairman of the board, Mr. Kinsel, says, I want to break the envelope. I want to have the first 200-foot roller coaster, and then so many years later, now let's go the first 300-foot, and a lot of it comes from his ideas. Simply make that known to the design and the planning and design team, then they know what to look for. They know what the boss wants. He wants a first of, fastest, or whatever, and then they start working with the manufacturers.
Now, a coaster that's been in service for a long time, I think, gets a certain nostalgia value attached to it. You know, maybe somebody rode this coaster when they were a kid, now they're bringing their kids back to ride that same coaster. But at the same time, a coaster that may have been thrilling when it was built a long time ago could today perhaps yield some space for something new, something more intense. So is this ever a delicate situation when we talk about maybe retiring an older coaster? Like, for example, let's say Mean Streak or Blue Streak. Let's say we take one of these wooden ones down and we could replace it with something really phenomenal, a new state-of-the-art seal coaster. But is that nostalgia value there? Does that become a delicate discussion?
It does, because the business, the challenge for the business is a balance. We want the whole family to have plenty to do here. We want to offer a very safe, very secure, and very fun experience for all ages. We want kiddie rides. We want very big thrill rides, very fast rides. So there's that balance, and and it's the balance of the guests that enjoy our park. We don't want a park that just has got exciting, big, fast thrill rides, and we want those kiddie rides, those intermediate rides, the shows, etc. So that's always a balance. And we have taken rides out many times. And it's a very careful, very thought-out process. You know, we understand we're going to disappoint somebody, but we hope, because we're the leaders in the industry and we have the newest and the best and the first of, that the disappointment will soon go away because we offer so much. And our new attractions that we keep putting in here are always breathtaking, always exciting. So, yeah, but it's not taken lightly, Sean. I can tell you, there's lots of discussions. For example, where the Windseeker is, we took our swinging ship, the Ocean Motion, out, and we're putting that back in somewhere because it's just a nice family ride. I mean, all members of the family can ride it, and it's fun, and it has that nostalgia. So we decided it's a good ride, and we think we're going to make it better, put it in a nice location, and we make room for the Windseeker to have an absolutely fantastic location.
Now, is guest input a consideration when deciding on a new ride for the park? And if so, what channels can guests input their suggestions through email or phone calls, comment forms, what have you?
I think it's all the above. I mean, we have over 500,000 friends on Facebook that give us a lot of feedback. We have some Twitter. We also are good friends with the coaster enthusiasts. American Coaster Enthusiasts, ACERs, we call them. They let us know. We take a look around the industry worldwide and see what they're liking, what the trends are. We do listen to our guests. There are comments that we certainly read, and we certainly encourage comments because that's our customers, our rider. I mean, that's what it's all about. So yeah, we listen to a lot of sources, and with this new social media, we have a wonderful way now to get instant feedback from a large number of people, and it's really helping us out.
Ed Dangler, you've been very generous with your time today, and since now I have your ear, I'm going to put in my 2 cents worth. I'm going to put in my 2 ride suggestions, if I could. I have the ear of the Director of Maintenance and New Construction right here, and I have 2 ride ideas I want to run by.
My pen's ready.
Okay. The first one actually comes from my wife, Natalia, and you actually hit on it already. You guys do everything bigger and better there. Like, for example, Demon Drop is now Power Tower. It's taller and faster. And the swing ride is now becoming Windseeker, bigger and taller. Right. One of my wife's favorite rides there is Ocean Motion. And she suggested to me, wouldn't it be great if they built like a really big Ocean Motion, a huge ship going back and forth, that it'd be just the same thing to the nth power?
Well, I appreciate those comments. I'll talk to those who could do something about it. But you can tell your wife that we're putting Ocean Motion back in, so it'll be waiting here in May when we open.
All right, and then here's my ride suggestion.
Okay.
One of my favorites over there is Raptor, and I would love to see the next generation of inverted coaster combining Raptor's twists and turns with a magnetic propulsion system like Maverick, so you could have an intense coaster that could slow down and then speed up and accelerate. Of course, it'd have to be the tallest and fastest inverted coaster, nothing but the best for Cedar Point there. And then right at the top of the first drop, you could have, I think the new trend is to have it hold there for a second before you make that drop. So that's what I would love to see.
That little pause that's in a lot of new rides is very exciting.
Yes, so that's what I'd love to see.
I'll keep that in mind and pass that on to who needs to hear about that.
All right, thanks so much, Ed.
Sean, it's my pleasure and honor to talk to you today.
Ed Dangler, the Director of Maintenance and New Construction at Cedar Point. Thanks very much, and we're looking forward to next season.
See you in May.